Do get online if you can and send her Twitter. But let's go back to these pictures now. I might just get that sound turned down in my ear if you don't mind. It's a little distracting just from the pictures. Thanks so much. Now, we're looking at all of this debris on the ground there, just moving right across Japan, coming from the coastal areas. We see the boats, we see cars, we see mud, all the debris moving through there. Thankfully, a lot of this is farming area, but it is moving into some buildings there, and we saw some ablaze on the ground. I want to go back to Ivan Cabrera, see what additional information
enough, if certainly shallow enough and closer to the shore. Some of these folks in these farmlands and some of these buildings have no idea what is happening right now. They are perhaps 100+ kilometers away from the shore, and they are seeing on a sunny day in Japan this coming in. I mean, unless you're watching TV, unless you're listening to the radio, you're not going to have any idea what's coming up here.
Period of time, I wasn't exactly sure what to do or where to go. I'd never been prepared for anything like this. My wife and I stood outside and basically held on to the outside of our house. You couldn't even stand up. I mean, literally at the peak of these waves that were washing over the ground, you literally could not stay on your feet. You had to kind of crouch down in a ball or put your back against something so you didn't fall. And that's exactly what we did for the length of the duration of it, which I would say was about probably a minute to 2 minutes. It felt like a lot longer than that, let me tell you.
Indeed. And are you saying that you live there, or that you're actually traveling there?
I actually live here. I've lived here for the last 8 years, and I live on the west side of the city in a little section of Tokyo called Kichijoji. And yes, there are earthquakes from time to time.
You've been there for a number of years. I do have to apologize because someone was actually talking in my ear when you mentioned the number of years that you've been there. How long did you say you'd been there?
I've been here for 8 years. My wife is
toward the coast. We've probably witnessed in live TV and all of our global audience.
Four lines. But get in stride a little bit more. But this was larger than anyone expected. It went on for longer than anyone expected. And I think there's also a high degree of self-sufficiency among people here, especially with regards to earthquakes, just as my wife showed, where she was comparing
this to the quake back into...
People are just walking up and down out of high-rises trying to figure out how they're going to get home now, Rosemary.
Indeed. And, of course, as you spoke to us, of course, we do need to mention that it is now upgraded to an 8.9 magnitude quake. We can see there, actually, a person there calling for help, basically, with the white flag. They want to be evacuated from their home. They're in fairly high...
That's really going to be the challenge at this point.
Matt Alt, who gave an extraordinary description of his situation as he witnessed this earthquake. He's married to a Japanese lady who was able to take him through it. He was very unnerved by it because she has grown up there. She knew exactly what to do. But this is the situation, isn't it, that people are realizing that this is very different to anything that they may recall in their living memory. This strength, when we heard from Ivan Cabrera, this is the 7th largest earthquake since they have been recorded.
Certainly, but even if you didn't live at the time that there was a huge earthquake, the Great Hanshin earthquake, you grow up learning that a giant earthquake could possibly happen. So let's talk about the person you spoke with, Matt, the American. He must have felt a very different experience from the Japanese wife, because she grew up understanding that the earthquake could happen at any time. You sort of learn that. You learn that from when you're a child. If I could get back to the tsunami as well, along the coastlines, if you've been anywhere along a Japanese coastline, it really is quite different than other coastlines around the world. If you go to a port, even though we're seeing some very, sizable devastation from the tsunami, what's different is that there are structures in place to try to protect the people of the town. Even in a town that could face a tsunami, people learn that they could evacuate at any moment if there is an earthquake. There are systems in place to try to help them get out of there. Now, certainly, if you have a sizable earthquake like what we just experienced, they can't protect everybody. But people in a small fishing village like the one we're seeing that's heavily being impacted by this particular, they do grow up learning at any moment I could evacuate. There are systems in place to try to help me get out of here. You try to be prepared for the worst, and the worst can always happen, but they do try to prepare, Rosemary.
Indeed. I'm not sure. I just want to double check with the control room. There's a number of people we're trying to get here too. We have someone on the line. This is Richard Lloyd Parry. He's actually the Asia editor for The Times. He's lived in Tokyo for 16 years. Thank you, sir, for speaking with us under these unfortunate circumstances. Tell us that you were actually in an office on the 7th floor, I understand, in central Tokyo. What happened when this 8.9 magnitude quake struck?
Well, the earthquake began as many such tremors do. I mean, living in Japan, one gets used to these every few months. There was actually one yesterday about the same time, which rattled and then faded away after about 20 or 30 seconds. But this one just kept getting stronger. The windows were rattling, the walls were shaking. I looked out of my window and I could see an adjacent building, a 7 or 8 story building, beginning to move from side to side. So I decided then it was time to get under my desk, where I cowered while the earthquake played itself out. It felt a very long one. It's hard to judge duration in these circumstances, but I think it must have been between a minute or 2 minutes, which when you're waiting for it to end seems like a very long time.
Indeed, certainly understand that. I mean, in actual fact, Kyung La, our reporter there in Tokyo, thought it might be 4 to 5 minutes. But as you say, it's a very difficult thing to judge the timing of this. Now, what is your situation? Where are you now exactly?
I'm in my office, having been for a walk out in central Tokyo to see what's going on. I'm now in my office monitoring the coverage on Japanese television.
And I
have to say that the central Tokyo is fine from what we've seen. I walked around for about half an hour. People are calm. A lot of people are still standing around outside, not going into their buildings. But there isn't much damage. The most I saw was a cracked window and a few cracks in the walls. But central Tokyo seems to be all right. Older buildings, I suspect, may have suffered more damage, but it's not obvious from here. The real dramas are clearly in northeast Japan, along northeast coast. And we're seeing now pictures of large-scale fires. You've seen the waters flooding into some of these northeast cities. That's where the damage is concentrated.
Yes, and we have listened to the Japanese Prime Minister, Naoto Kan, appealing to the people of Japan to remain calm, a difficult thing to do, certainly under these circumstances, as you fear, certainly along the coastline, the northeast there, the approach of yet another tsunami. What about people trying to get hold of loved ones, family members? Because I'm seeing a lot of that on my Twitter account, people trying to make contact with their friends and family.
Yes, I think the problem is that the phones are very jammed. Everyone's on their phone, on their mobile.
And has hit Sendai. Let's have a listen.
Japan's meteorological agency says the quake measured magnitude 8.4. The
warnings have been issued in 19 countries, and we believe just a short time ago that civil sirens went off in Honolulu in Hawaii. So this is a story that has huge consequences, far-reaching consequences. We know that countries like Australia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Taiwan, they have all issued tsunami warnings. So it is something that everyone is monitoring so closely. There you are looking at pictures from Sendai. These dramatic images came to us a short time ago. This is that wall, that massive wall of water that is just going